welcome to the final tutorial on our lakeland scene, lake and forest. So I have a feeling that we need to have a stronger sun lamp because the light isn't really zinging across here and I want it to. So I'm going to increase the brightness of the sun. Now at the moment it's 2.8. I'm going to take it all the way up to 4. I'm also going to make it slightly redder because this is an evening scene. And I'm going to piddle around with the texture as well, the sky texture. I'm going to make this somewhat redder. Like that. I'm going to drop the other colours down a bit. Maybe not down that far, hey? And that looks fine. So let's re-render that and we'll see how much more like a sunset scene it actually looks now. And there we go. That's enough for us to see the result. I took the energy all the way up to 6 on the lamp. Other than that, it's exactly as I left you. And you can see that we've got a lot more light effect going on, light and shade. We've got a big area of shadow here because the sun's over here. Yeah, that will be fine. So, the next major thing we're going to do is we're going to have some birds in the scene to give us some life. So, once again I'm going to go into a different layer and I'm going to model a bird. And it's not going to be a very good model of a bird because it doesn't have to be. So we're going to I'm going to add a cylinder actually. I'm going to start this model with a cylinder. Don't know where it's gone to. There it is. I forgot to do my usual thing and snap to center. I ought to really do that. Where are we? View selected. Not sure where we are. Right. Object. Snap. Cursor to center, object, snap, selection to cursor. Now we know where we are. We're in the middle. Makes life a lot easier. Right, first thing we're going to do, I'm going to turn this cylinder around and I'm going to turn it around in the Y direction, 90 degrees. And this is obviously going to be our bird's body. Actually I've got too many vertices, so I'm going to do that again. Delete. Object. Oh, sorry. Add. Mesh. Cylinder. I don't want 40 vertices. I only want 9 will do fine, I think. Right. That's about the right sort of proportionate length for a bird's body, I think. And we'll go into edit mode and we'll edit ourselves a bird. Now this bird is going to be a symmetrical bird, so I want to get rid of half of this. Now I'm going to get rid of this half. so. I'm going to add a modifier. It's going to be a mirror modifier in the y-axis. I have merge and clipping on. And just tidy up the edges here. Now everything I do to this side is going to happen to the other side. The first thing I want is some loop cuts. I'm going to put one just behind the sort of head area. That's also going to be the start of the wings. I'm going to put another end of the wings. I'm going to put another part way down near the tail, like so. And now I'm going to apply some scale to the whole thing. So on A, select all. I'm going to flatten it out like that. So now we've got a somewhat flattened shape. And along this side here, because this is where the wings are going to go, I'm going to make the wings by extruding out this face here. So I want to bring these faces here closer together, and the easy way to do that is to not have that selected at all. So A, getting tired now, it's been a long day. I've done all these tutorials for this forest scene in one day, so I'm getting understandably a little knackered. So there we go. So that's what I'm doing there. Now I want to go into face select mode. I'm going to select that face, I'm going to extrude it. So you can see this is making the wings. Gone a bit too far because I'm going to have the wings in two sections. And let me sweep this back a bit. Bring that up. And I'm going to extrude again. Further out, I'm going to scale down, bring that scale back. Now you've got kind of a wing shape. To take this, actually that needs to come down like that. Go to edge select mode. Push that back like so, push that down like that. It's kind of not wide enough really, is it? So, turn this back on, C, escape, take that out. Actually it looks better with the body pushed out like that, but maybe not that far. I didn't intend to do that, that's because I still had edges, edge select on, and I wanted that. But sometimes these happy little accidents happen. So that's kind of a bird shape. Next thing I want to do, I want to squash down this end, like so. I'm going to go back to selecting edges, squash down like that. Don't want that edge selected really. Oh dear. Keep leaving that turned on when I shouldn't do. This is only a very rough bird shape because we're only ever going to see them sort of like in the distance. I'm not even going to bother to close the ends because we're never going to see it. And here we go, and it wants a bit of a head, so I'm going to do a similar thing to what I did on the back end of the body, only not quite so dramatically. I've gone back to selecting vertices. I'm basically just getting it into a bit of a rounder shape here for the bird's neck. Not that it's really going to have a neck, but hey. E for extrude. You can see here we've got a void. E for extrude again. Scale. E for extrude again. Scale right the way down. We kind of got a head. It's very crude, but hey. Now we want kind of a beak shape. E again. That's good enough. That's a bird. It's a bird shape, and that's what matters, because you're only going to see just a rough shape whizzing through the sky. So I'm going to apply the mirror. Oh, going to go to object mode first. Apply the mirror. Once I've got into object mode, I'm going to create a subdivision surface for it, just the one. So turn down the render view. And that's our bird shape. It looks pretty bird shaped to me. Now I'm going to give it a material. Most birds are kind of a pigeony grey colour. And there's no real point on putting much of a textured value on this. One of the things I've learnt about birds and doing birds like this is just make it grey, make the specular a slight colour, quite intense, but very soft, like that. We're going to make it smooth shading, and really what we want to do is to make the underneath of it a different colour, because it needs to be lighter on the underside. Now that grey is probably not dark enough. I'm going to go down a bit. I'm going to boost the red a bit, the green slightly, try and make it a bit brown, like so. That's a sort of pigeony grey. So if we look at the underside, then what we can do is we go into edit mode, make sure that's turned off so we don't select all the sides underneath. We want C, and there we go, that's everything underneath selected. And now I'm going to add a new material, escape to get rid of the circle select. And this is in fact going to be white. It's going to have a low specular intensity. And that's about it. Assign that. Go back to object mode. You can see we've now got a bird that's whitish on the underneath. Actually it's probably a bit too white. Just take that down a bit. So you've got some colour detail on there, and you can put as much colour detail or as little colour detail as you like. I think myself that this is actually going to be fine. Obviously if you're going to see it close up this wouldn't be fine. The one thing I think it does need is probably an eye. It's an odd thing, but humans are very sensitive about eyes. So I'm going to go back into edit mode. I'm going to select this face here. I'm going to subdivide it, and I'm going to pick one of those faces as an eye, that one there, and I'm going to put yet another new material on it, and this one's just going to be black, but it's going to have a shine on it. So now, whoops, didn't hit a sign. See, I'm getting tired. I've been up all day doing this tutorial for you guys, and it's taking it out of me. So there we go. And because I applied the thing the last time, I need to repeat it for the other side. Otherwise it's only going to be a one-eyed bird. Not good. So, select that, subdivide. Pick that one there, I think it was. Yes it was. That material there, assign. There you go. I could make the beak a different colour as well, but I could spend ages tiddling around with this, and this series of tutorials I think is long enough anyway. So now I'm going to move this huge bird, it will be huge, into our main scene. Oh my god! It's the rook. Okay, so let's move this somewhere it's not going to be seen. I'm going to scale it down a bit as well, otherwise it's going to be tiny scale factors in our particle simulation in a minute. And I'm going to have to add an object to emit particles, and it's going to have to be off camera. So a good object to use for anything like that is an icosphere. So I'm going to add an icosphere in, and I don't really care how big it is or whatever, because it's not going to be on camera. It's going to be over here. It's going to be off camera. I know that anything to the left of this tree is always going to be off camera. so that's fine. And this is going to emit our birds, and so here we go, particle system for that icosphere. Oh, I better rename that. It's not really a cylinder, is it? It's a bird. Now you see, I do actually have several birds which I've made, a lot of them that are better than this, but I wanted to show you how to make the bird. But I'll add this bird to my connection. In fact, I'm not just going to call it a bird, I'm going to call it LP bird for low poly, because there's not much geometry in it. So back to our icosphere, particle system, new particle system. We don't want 1,000 birds, we want about 12. Start 1, end maybe frame 7 or something, just so there's a bit of difference. Lifetime we want to take up. Going to omit it from the volume, random, and we don't need to worry about the velocity or rotation or anything like that, because that's all going to be taken care of us with the voids. Now what this does is it lets us set up physics for things that are birds, and it lets you have things like maximum airspeed, and I'm going to set that down to 5 because 10 is blisteringly fast. In fact, I'm going to go further down that. I'm going to set it to 3.5, and this is blending units per second, so that's how far a bird's going to go in a second. Maybe 4 would be okay actually. Acceleration, I'm going to take that down to 0.25, and our minimum airspeed I'm going to make 1, so that they don't hover. You don't want a hovering bird really in this scene. If it was a hawk maybe. Air personal space, I'm going to take that up to 3, and that's what gap there is between the birds before they think that it's pretty urgent to avoid each other. Now this lot we're not going to use. This lot we're not going to use because we're not allowed to land. It's merely going to be allowed to fly. We are going to multiply the mass with the size, and I'm going to increase the mass a bit and make it a random size and take the size up a little, and we'll see more about the size in a minute. Right, this is the Boyd brain, as they say, and there's several different rules. Separate and flock are the first two, and it's good to leave those alone really. And rule evaluations at fuzzy, which is fine. What we want to do is we want to add a new rule, and the rule is going to be follow leader, and we're going to use another empty in a minute. I'll set that up in a minute, as the leader to follow, and this lets us control the flock. It means we can move them around the scene where we want them to go at different times. Very useful if you're doing an animation, obviously. So we're going to render, and in this case we're just going to render one object. I could make several birds with slight differences, with the wings in different positions. Actually, shall I do that? No, I won't do it for this time, but that's something you could do quite easily and put them in a group. And what did we call our bird? I forgot what we called our bird. LP bird, wasn't it? Right. LP bird. So there we go. And we need to play about with bird sizes. I'm going to make it ridiculously large to start with, just so that I know that I'm going to see it. And you can see bits of birds sticking out of there. And if I now hit play, and you'll see birds are moving around in there, but not a lot is happening because it's follow my leader. They've got no leader to follow. So we'll stop there. I'm going to add and empty. Let's first of all remove that cursor to the middle so we know where it's going to be. Make it look a bit different from the last one. And I'm going to call it bird leader. And I'm going to go back and where it says follow the leader, bird leader, distance, and that's distance behind the leader to follow, 1, that's fine, doesn't really matter. So now, if I hit play, you'll see that our birds come out. And they're not moving very realistically at the moment because I need to get things. We apparently only have one. Well, that's not very good, is it? It might be to do with the size and the rules because they're far too big at the moment. Let's take the size down to maybe 0.2 or 0.3. You can see it's behaving in a more realistic fashion, but it's probably like 58 I think is overkill. I think we're a victim of the separate rule here because they don't always like that rule. So let's go back to the start, try that again. Follow the leader at the top of the rule chain. I'm just going to play around with this for a little while and get it going properly. So I've just played around with it and I've just done a box render using Shift B just to see this bunch of birds, and they're far too bright. So I need to go and I need to change the materials a bit. And I'm not sure if they're too bright because they're upside down. Which is something I just thought of. No, they're not upside down. No, they're too bright because they're too bright. So, and here's me hoping to get it all sorted in one go, but not. And I think what it is I've got that everything set too high. So intensity needs to come down. That's okay. This is the top one. Oh yeah, I've got 0.8. I mean, come off it. Let's try that again. As you see, it does actually remember the box from previous tries. Nope, they're still too bright. Oh, I know what it is. It's because I've got hardness at 10. That's just too much. Try again. It's just a question of getting birds that look like birds. They don't have to look too much like birds because there's going to be some blur applied in a minute. But that's good enough. They're not white, that's the main thing. I'm just going to turn down that intensity of that as well. And then the next thing we want to do is some compositing. And we want to choose a shot when the birds are at full speed, so we can see how much to blur them, because it's pointless choosing them when they're turning, they're banked and turning like this. And this is quite good because we've lost them. Okay, they're still there. If we look, they're still there. There's a bird, 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 but they're dim enough that we've lost them, and that is exactly what we want, because you want things moving but you can't really see exactly what they are. And when you think about it, that's what birds are like when they fly anyway, unless they're flying across the sky, and that's the next thing we want to look at. So if I hide this and view camera, now we get rid of that box by just hitting Shift B and boxing the whole thing, and that will get rid of that. Right, so if I go back to the beginning again and we'll play it, and you can see where these birds go. If I highlight them, you see these birds go down like that. In actual fact, I've decided that maybe I don't quite like that. I want them to start further over this way. And that's fair enough. And I did bake them, so I need to go in and free that bake now and rebake it. So down here somewhere there's cache, free bake, bake, and this takes hardly any time at all. And as you can see, you've got the red line across the bottom that tells you something's been frozen in memory, and we'll see what we're like now with these birds. And they're coming in at about frame 80. They're going across a section of sky, which is good. They're rotating and coming towards us. Now they're actually going a bit slow, I think. So I'm going to speed them up a little tiny bit. So I'm going to unbake my simulation. Where is it? Cache, 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 free bake. Stop that. And I've forgotten whether I can actually, I think I can actually keyframe this. So I can actually give them a higher speed to start with, which will get them in position quickly. So maybe that's the thing to do. So if I keyframe them at say 6, there you go, I can keyframe them. I'd forgotten whether I could do that or not. And then down here keyframe them at 4. Let's see what that looks like. We can see what it looks like just by pressing play. We don't have to bake it to see what it looks like, but the birds won't actually render. That's better. I like that more, because you've got more birds crossing the sky. You've got more of a dynamic feel to that. So we'll bake that. there we go. So that's baked. We want to choose a point where the birds are going fairly quickly, like there. And I'm going to do a box render, so that's Shift B. I'm just going to render that area there. And there you go, you can see what they're like. Now, what we want to do, we'll still do this with box render selected, is we're actually going to do some compositing. So the first thing we need to do, because we're going to do a blur effect, we want to have the vector pass in there, because that tells the compositor what speed things are going at. So there we go, deliver a speed vector pass. And now we can go into our compositing setup, tick use nodes, tick backdrop. I'm going to add in a viewer, otherwise the backdrop doesn't work. And you can see what we've got at the moment, and what I can do is I can move that about so we can see it. So there we go. So we can see it, so we can see how much blur we're applying. Now I'm going to add in, it's called a filter, vector blur is its name. The image input is to go there. We'll have the image output going to the composite output, and also here. Now because we need the speed node, and we also need Z, now at the moment it's not going to do anything, and the reason it's not going to do anything is because we haven't actually delivered our speed pass, so we need to re-render it. So I'm going to render the image. Maybe using box mode doesn't actually give us our, I think I'm going to have to probably do a hover render. So here we go, render image, and I'll come back in a minute. That's better. It seems that Blender no longer exports the speed information when you do a box render. Now, at the moment I've got blur set to 0, and if you watch those little birdies closely, watch the birdie, well actually I might be able to zoom in on that and make it a bit easier. There we go. Now, if you watch the birdies closely, if I turn the blur up to 2, it'll take a while to update itself, and you can see the effect. It's not very much because they're not going very fast, but it does make a difference in an animation. I can increase it probably if I turn this minimum speed down to 0. And I don't think I actually want to do that because the camera's moving. So right, So that's our compositing setup. Now how am I going to render it? Well, yeah, I've said before that if you're doing a pro job, you really want to render into actual images and then stitch the images together, because you might want to change them around in Photoshop. But in this case, I know I'm not. So we're going to set the anti-aliasing first of all, 16, Catmull ROM, which is better, but it's a bit slow. We've got motion blur already, we're not going to use motion blur, that takes forever. And everything else, performance wise, I've got the tile size set to 32, 6 threads because I've got a 6 thread processor. Now the output is going to go, I'm going to put the output on my desktop actually, or will I? No, I won't. I'll put them in the lake directory. So that's in the lake directory where the actual file is. And I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to put LK1 because it's going to be my first render of the whole sequence. And it's not going to be PNG, it's going to be Xvideo, because that results in the smallest file size. And that's about it. I'm going to keep the same dimensions, so it's going to be in full HD, which is pretty good. Anything else we want to worry about? We haven't got more than one render layer. We've got the speed pass on. And that sky now actually looks pretty good, so that's brilliant. Environmental lighting's okay, we've checked that. So, we're all ready to go. All I've got to do now is hit render animation and render it. See you in a day.